Well, Justin, welcome to the show.
John, good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Most people don't choose to lead, they get thrust into leadership. And typically that might happen, Justin, when someone gets married, but they might not take that leadership role really seriously. So it's when they have children that all of a sudden they're like, wow, I am a leader. Do you remember that moment for you as a dad and then your responsibility to lead your kids?
It's an interesting question. I don't know that as a dad, I ever early on thought of myself as a leader. I think, you're trying to figure out what it means to be a dad. Many of us in our nation's rates right now, there's a fatherlessness epidemic. So a lot of us didn't grow up with dads or had disengaged dads who weren't there. I had a present dad, so I was fortunate, but I think there's a lot of fathers out there who are just trying to figure out what it means to be a dad, let alone be a leader. Right. And I think that that's a process that evolves as you get into the role of being a dad or being a parent and understand that there is a path to leadership. There is a path or a journey that you walk down that you need to bring your kids down. And so I think it's an evolution. It's not something that many of us just wake up to. And in fact, that's why I started this platform and started this movement, if you will, to help other dads be intentional, be engaged, and to lead their families, because I myself was having a hard time with it, and created a formula or a method that I felt could help other dads do the same thing.
Well, tell us about that. Tell us the journey to this Daddy Saturday. How did it happen? What got you so interested in this specifically?
Well, I was a young father in corporate America. My wife had left teaching and started her own business as an entrepreneur, bridal boutique. And so she's in retail and she's working, during the week as well as on Saturdays. That's their biggest day in retail. So I found myself at home with our 2-week-old daughter by myself all day. And then we added 3 boys to the mix every 2 years. So pretty soon I was at home with 4 kids, an infant, a newborn, and a couple of toddlers. And man, it was just crazy. And I had them all day by myself and trying to figure out what to do and how to do it. And I often had what I call a dad hangover, where I'd come home traveling a lot during the week in my corporate role, stressed out, tired, overwhelmed, kind of overcome with this role of having my kids all day on Saturday, but, wanting to be there, wanting to support my wife. And what I found was that if I was intentional, if I planned my day, if I created a game plan for our time together, then things just tended to go better. They weren't perfect, right? But we had some epic days and some epic memories, and really started to create these incredible Saturdays together. And then I recognized that just obviously wasn't on Saturday, that I could take those same principles and do this every day of the week with my kids. And the transformation was just phenomenal. Our relationship, the communication, even at a young age, and the way that my kids and I began to interact together, and even the way my wife viewed me, everything changed through that intentionality on those Saturdays. And I remember my son Mason, they started asking midweek on like a Wednesday, Dad, what are we doing on Saturday? And they'd always want to know what the plan was. And Mason one week goes, Dad, what are we doing for Daddy Saturday? And I'm like, man, you just named it, son. You named it. We're claiming it. That's what we're calling this thing. And so we began filming it, putting it on YouTube. And then, John, about 2 years ago, I did a TEDx, and that TEDx was on the fatherlessness epidemic. And I recognized, after learning about this challenge we have as a country and all the societal ills that come from fatherlessness, that I had a solution. I could bring what we did in Daddy Saturday and our principles and the community around that to the world and help change fatherhood one dad at a time with each of their kids. And so that's what we set out on the last couple of years to do.
Anytime you're teaching or you're sharing principles or sharing ideas in a topic like this, does it add a pressure to you to continue to live up to the standard of being the dad that wrote Daddy Saturday?
Yeah, I kind of call it my fatherhood AA, if you will, right? It's like anytime you put yourself out there, you make yourself accountable. And believe me, I fail just as much, if not more, than anybody else. In fact, I probably fail more because I'm always trying and iterating and pushing myself in the role of a father. And so what I found is that for me, it's caused me and our kids to have kind of a mindset. You've heard people in the past where they may use their family name and they may say, you're part of the Batt family. The Batt family has this standard or these expectations. For myself and for my kids, it's, hey, look, you guys, we're Daddy Saturday. And so, when people see us, people that know us, they're looking to us to see, how do I parent? How do I interact? How do I discipline? What does that look like? And that's privately and it's publicly. And we've exposed ourselves, and I've been extremely transparent, I think, to a healthy level on social media, so that people can see those things and have a window into our lives. Again, not perfect, but one example of someone who's at least trying to tackle this thing we call fatherhood in our current society and all that's going on. So yes, it's caused me to have a higher standard in our family, but I think that, no different than what I'm prescribing for myself, I'm prescribing for everyone else, is that you set a mission, vision, values for your own family and do the same thing and hold yourself to that higher standard.
Is there a more important role a leader plays than leading at home?
No, because, oftentimes, and that's why my biggest platform is actually LinkedIn, because I'm working with, and I've hit a hot button with all these leaders who are trying to lead in the workplace, but yet if they're not taking care of their home base, then it's really hard to lead in the workplace. And so, for me, if you're taking care of your four walls and you're taking care of your wife and your kids at home as a father and as a husband, then that's where it starts and ends, and everything else comes after that. Because if you're doing a great job there, then it makes it that much easier to be successful at the workplace, because all of us that are in that role, we struggle with the tension between work and home. We struggle with that ideal of being the provider, right? And sometimes we think that provider role is where it starts and ends as a father. And that's completely a fallacy, and it's incorrect, right? And so when you take care of and you start with your home base first, then those other roles tend to fall into place, and it's far easier to manage that tension and to play the proper role as the father, as well as the being in the workplace as well.
A mentor of mine always says, if you don't lead at home, you're not a leader at all. And that always stuck with me. And I've carried that forward, because it's like almost the hypocrite in us at work, when where we're supposed to be leading at home is in complete turmoil. And I don't know why that visual has always stuck with me, is like, if I can lead at home well, at least it gives me a chance to lead at work really well. There's a part of this, Justin, one of maybe my favorite thing ever is this priest that I'm very close with said, John, your responsibility is not to make your kids safe. Your job is to make them courageous. How, as a dad or as a parent, can we help make our kids courageous, or is that just something they're wired to do?
Oh, man. No, absolutely not wired to do. I would say kids are resilient, right? We're seeing that now with the COVID crisis, and you're watching these kids with tremendous resiliency overcome significant challenges. But at the same time, I think courage is something that is developed in our kids. And there's such a fear-based society that we live in, that if we don't, as parents and as fathers, step up and teach our kids those principles, then they're not going to learn it on their own, and they're going to actually go the other direction because of the culture that we live in today, especially with what the media drives home. And so they're going to perceive this culture of fear-based information, and we have to separate that for them. What I would say is that it comes back to a principle we have in Daddy Saturday, and that is it is not the job of the dad to be the hero. And that is a big fallacy. Again, it's a myth that's out there on fatherhood. Everybody's talking about dad be the hero, dad be the hero. Yeah, we all want to be the hero to our kids. But if we do that, we're failing our children. And we won't build that core root of courageousness in our kids. And the reason why is because when you play the hero, then you don't allow your kids to succeed or fail on their own. And indeed, you need to make your kids the hero of their own story by serving as their guide and allowing them to experience success and failure on their own, with you guiding them through that process. And so we want our kids to fail. We want them to fail early and often, and experience that failure is not a bad thing. It's a positive thing. And only can we move forward when we experience failure and we're pushing ourselves. But failure in the context of an 8-year-old, right, is far different than failure as a 28-year-old. What we're now experiencing as we look at the millennial generation and Gen Z coming up is there's a bunch of kids whose parents never let them fail. So now they're failing in adulthood or young adulthood, and it's catastrophic. They have no mechanism to deal with it. They have no courage to push past obstacles that they face in their life. So if you want to raise a kid who becomes a great adult, a good kid who becomes a great adult and can handle obstacles and overcome adversity, the way you do that is allowing them to experience failure in their youth, being the hero of their own story and guiding them through that process. And I'll tell you, a really important point of this is the fact that when you serve as their guide, what it does is it drops your ego as their dad. It drops your pride, and it allows you to bring other people into their life who may also serve as additional guides in areas where you have weaknesses. And this is a big thing that I really preach and I focus on in our own lives. And I talk to a lot of other dads about, because I'm not great at everything. And I rob my kids of the opportunity to have experiences in certain areas where it may take courage or they may have to overcome a fear. And they may do that through another dad guiding them through that process who has expertise in that area.
Well, you mentioned the word ego. Ryan Holiday wrote that ego is the enemy. And then he said ego is the enemy of being a great parent because he's a parent himself. Why is ego so bad when it comes to how we lead our kids?
Well, I think ego is bad in leadership in general. If you think back to a lot of other leadership principles, John Maxwell and others, right? Great leaders let others see themselves sweating. I think when you have an ego, you're afraid to admit your own faults or failures. It prevents transparency or vulnerability in leadership. And a great leader has all of those characteristics. And so when you drop your ego, when you let your pride go, it allows you to open yourself up and expose some of the cracks in your walls. And that's okay. People want to see that. I think the biggest mistake I made early in this platform is I felt that I had to be a perfect dad. If I was going to put myself out there and claim this thing as Daddy Saturday and not be an expert father, but try to be an expert in fatherhood, then I had to be perfect. And that was the biggest mistake that I made. It was through vulnerability, through transparency, through admitting my faults to others and to my own kids. That is how I grew. And that is how they began to respect me as a leader, both in the platform as well as in my own family.
Well, let's talk about this idea of vulnerability and transparency, because I don't know if this is bad or awful, but this is a real thought that I have a lot. Okay. I tell people the thought of somebody else raising my kids keeps me more invested in my marriage than anything else, because I couldn't imagine another man getting the opportunity to raise my children. Is that a bad thought? If it is, how should I be thinking about it?
No, I don't think it's a bad thought. And I myself, we must be a lot alike, because I find myself in certain situations like going to that negative outlook to drive a positive behavior. I think that's a natural thing as a man. We tend to do that. Like I do Spartan races, and there are times where I imagine people inflicting harm on my family purely to make me get through a race when it's really hard, right? To get that motivation going. So I think it's a state that we go into. No, I think it's a form of accountability again. And you're imagining listen, raising kids is a blessing, right? Children are a blessing from the Lord. And it is our job as their father to raise them up, to teach them in the way that they should go. So when they're older, they don't depart from it. And to your point, that is a blessing. It is a gift. It is an honor. It is an opportunity. And why would we ever want to give that away to someone else to do? And the reason why that happens is, divorce, unfortunately, can cause a crack in that role and that responsibility. And so, yes, you staying there, you being invested in your marriage and you focusing on your kids is a very positive thing. And if you have to have a negative view to do that, then that's great. We in our family, my wife and I have made a commitment that the divorce is not in our vocabulary. It's not a word we speak about. We don't bring it up because it's not even an option, right? We're going to work through anything that comes our way. And that is so important for us because that is how we maintain our core family unit.
You make me want to run through a wall. Not a Spartan race. I don't have that kind of stamina. But you do bring up a good point. So many of us, dads, moms, we have hobbies. We have things that give us health, enjoyment in life. For me, it's competitive golf. For you, it's Spartan races. How do you balance your role as a believer, a husband, a father, obviously a career, and then also these hobbies that help give you fulfillment? How do we think about balancing those things or those hobbies that we have in our life? Is there like a mechanism that you are like, this is too much, or this is, what is it?
I'll give a couple of tips. There's a couple of things, and we talk about this a lot in our course, Dad Boss, right? It's around the concept of optimizing your life. And I feel like it's really important to achieve peak performance as a dad through optimizing your life. And that's how you're able to give of yourself to others, your wife and your kids, and in the workplace. It is important to have your own hobbies. It is important to have things that are important to you that you can invest in that are filling your tank, because you're going to have lots of different ways that you're getting withdrawals and emptying your tank. And so you have to have things that are going to fill your tank up. For me, it's waking up early in the morning during the week and the weekends, and I spend time with God, spend time in his word, spend time exercising and focusing on things that are important to me. So I get that out of the way in my day, first thing before my kids wake up, and that's my time, right? It's sacred. And so I've invested in myself. I've invested spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically before my kids wake up. And that is how, I go into every day attacking my day, me happening to my day instead of my day happening to me. So that's one thing that I found that has created tremendous momentum and success in my life and in my day to day. The second thing is, when it comes to hobbies, I've looked at hobbies that are contributing to myself and to my family. So I've tried really hard to find things that don't take me away from my family. I mean, if they do, then it's in an environment where I've made so many deposits because I am so intentional that my kids are like, yeah, Dad, go play golf, or yeah, Dad, go do a Spartan race, right? Because they see that as they're like, it's good. You've made so many deposits that if you want to go make a withdrawal or have a guys weekend, it's totally fine, because it's not like an every weekend thing. And I've involved them in what's important to me. So my kids also do Spartan races. We train together. If you're golfing, right, they can come out and be your caddy or just ride with you and be a part of that experience. And it's not all the time, but you got to include them in that. And so it's not purely a withdrawal, and that they're included in it. And if you do that, then those hobbies become part of the family rhythm, and it can be a real positive thing for everybody involved.
Well, it's great stuff, man. We really appreciate, one, your wisdom, the time, the effort that you've put in, most importantly to your kids, okay, and to your marriage, because that's where it starts for those four guys, one daughter and three boys. But then now to share it with our audience, to give us some best practices to lead better at home and be better parents, fathers, mothers. It's excellent stuff. Where can people find out more about your work and what you're doing?
Yeah, well, I'll share that. And then I want to leave you with this too, because I think this is a really important closing point as we tie a bow in this conversation. And that is, one thing I realized, and so important as a leader, is that, I have a mission to change the world. But what I recognized and what was put in front of me was, if you want to change the world, change the person in front of you. Start with your own family, start with your own wife, start with your own team, right? And if you do that, that's how it expands and scales, and that's how you change the world. It's that ripple effect, the ripple principle. We have a Daddy Saturday Kenya now, right? We have Daddy Saturday Canada starting. We have Daddy Saturday Vietnam that's coming to bear. And that all started because I focused on my own kids in my own backyard, right? And so to think now that we're international is insane, but it started with a one-on-one focus. And that's a core principle of leadership that I hope your audience can take away. And then if they want to learn more about all of that, they can go to daddysaturday.com. That's our hub for all things Daddy Saturday. They can see our dadboss.com as well is a great place to go for the curriculum, the course. And then you can find me at Justin Batt on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome, Justin. You're a gift, man. Keep it up.
Thanks, John. Go Tigers.